town meeting members present, I declare the presence of a quorum. Congratulations. Before we rise to salute the flag, I would just like to note that Catherine Ellsworth is our new town clerk as of the end of September. This is her first official meeting as town clerk, and I think every clerk puts their own stamp on any town meeting. And what I hope you noticed tonight was we moved away from the pen, paper, and pad, and that Kathy checked you in on our tablet. So congratulations to Kathy and welcome.
Thank you.
All right, would members please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. For the benefit of new members, and I should note that we do have a couple of new members that were caucused in this evening. Congratulations to our new town meeting members. For the benefit of new members, as well as others, the chair will review some matters of information and instruction relative to the conduct of this meeting, most of which are procedural. The chair will read each article or summary thereof aloud, which will be followed by the recommendation of the Finance Committee. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is the main motion. Town meeting members shall usually speak on all motions before others. However, any citizen voter in the town will be permitted to speak after town meeting members have done so. As is tradition, all members addressing the body are asked to use the microphone. If a town meeting, this is for our special COVID rules this evening, due to space limitations, only town meeting members and a few staff are in the room. If a town meeting member wishes to see his or her time to a citizen, we have a runner that will accompany the speaker, go down to the atrium and accompany the speaker back into the room. This evening, members of the public were invited to watch the meeting from the atrium area of the high school. And it's my understanding there are several citizens who are present there. In special circumstances, the chair may permit a committee chairman or the sponsor of an article or some other person such as the town council to speak before others for the purpose of information or other explanation. This meeting, as it wishes, may change the order of discussion of articles in the warrant by majority vote. The chair reminds all present that no person may speak without permission of the chair and that no speaker may be interrupted except for a point of order or privilege. All questions addressed to any other person present must go through the chair. Neither cross-examination nor reference to personalities will be permitted. They are out of order. The chair retains the authority at all times to rule certain questions and comments irrelevant to the meeting. Direct controversies between speakers are an affront to the dignity of the town meeting and will not be tolerated. All proposed amendments must be in writing with a copy given to the town clerk. And the reason for this is purely for the sake of clarity, so that we all know what we are voting for or against, and in order that a main motion after amendment can be clearly stated by the chair prior to voting. I thank all members who have given me prior notice of possible amendments. The chair will from time to time recite specific requirements for votes on certain motions. As a reminder, in June 1998, the town meeting voted to adopt Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 15, to authorize the moderator to declare without count of any vote requiring a two-thirds vote. Most of our voting is conducted on a voice vote basis. If the chair has a doubt of the voice vote, the chair will ask for a standing vote. Standing votes are taken by precinct, with each precinct teller reciting aloud his or her tally of those in favor, those opposed. The total of all precincts is then announced by the chair. If 7 members rising in place indicate they have doubt, the chair will ask for a standing vote. After the chair has made the announcement, the vote may not be questioned. Roll call voting. A roll call vote may be taken on any motion when the following conditions have been met. A motion must be made for a roll call vote at the conclusion of debate or after a voice vote has been taken. The motion must be seconded. Passage of the motion for the roll call requires a majority vote. A motion for a roll call vote may not be made after a standing vote has been taken and the results announced by the chair. Interruption of any method of voting will be considered out of order. The chair requests that all persons with cell phones or other electronic devices kindly place the device in silent mode or turn it off. As always, no smoking is permitted on school grounds. I would also like to call your attention to the location of the emergency exits in the room, which are clearly marked and on either side of the room in the front and rear. This is our second town meeting under COVID protocol. Our COVID protocol requires all entering this room must wear a mask during the meeting. Speakers may briefly remove their masks while at the microphone and will take care to wipe the microphone prior to and after speaking with the Lysol wipes provided. The return of the warrant indicates it was properly served. There is a motion by Chairman Bennett that the chair omit the reading of the warrant, which has been seconded by Selectman Clark. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We will now turn to Article 1 in our booklet. Article 1, Transportation Network. To see what sum the town will vote to appropriate from the Transportation Network Fund or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, everyone. How about now? We recommend that the town vote to appropriate $28,824.80 from the Transportation Network Fund into the Senior and Social Services Transportation Revolving Fund to support this community service.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Article 2, supporting first responders. To see if the town will vote, 1, to express its appreciation and support of the Danvers first responders and their families as they work to preserve a safe and secure community. 2, to reaffirm its commitment to providing the training, tools, and equipment necessary to protect their health and safety and the health and safety of community members. 3, to acknowledge the vital role first responders have and continue to play as essential workers in the midst of this global pandemic, and 4, to express its condolences and deep sense of gratitude for those first responders who make the ultimate sacrifice in service to their communities or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend that the town vote to 1, express its appreciation and support of Danvers first responders and their families as they work to preserve a safe and secure community. 2, to reaffirm its commitment to providing the training, tools, and equipment necessary to protect their health and safety and the health and safety of community members. 3, to acknowledge the vital role first responders have and continue to play as essential workers in the midst of this global pandemic. And 4, to express its condolences and deep sense of gratitude for those first responders who make the ultimate sacrifice in service to their communities.
Thank you. The chair will recognize Board of Selectmen Chair Dan Bennett. And I suppose I should make that updated. It's no longer the Board of Selectmen, it's the Select Board.
Thank you, Madam
Thanks, Dan.
Moderator. Good evening, fellow town meeting members. Article 2, as proposed by the Select Board, is pretty straightforward and easy to understand and support. As well as the article, on October 20th, the Select Board voted to direct the manager to build a working group of interested parties to work with him with a goal of reporting an action plan to the Select Board in the spring. This committee will include 3 members from police, 2 from the fire, 2 from the Select Board, 2 human rights and inclusion members, 4 to 5 town meeting members, and 1 from the faith community. Their goals will be engage with our police and fire department personnel to ensure they receive the support they need, training, equipment, recognition, to be effective. Celebrate the good work the departments are already doing to engage and support both the community at large as well as marginalized groups specifically. Explore whether to adopt a symbol and/or put on an event to honor first responders, frontline workers who keep us safe and uphold our community values. Engage the community at large, including marginalized members of our community, specifically in dialogue to understand their experience and look for ways to build bridges and strengthen relationships. Seek to understand whether our programs, policies, regulations, and services are delivered equally across our community. Encourage marginalized members to become more involved in local government so that our workforce and volunteer base reflects our demographics. And in my opinion, there's no amendment necessary for Article 2. Mr. Lucy reached out to the Attorney General's office looking for an opinion on proposed language for an amendment.
Mr. Bennett, that is out of order.
Thank you.
Not relevant. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
We're supposed to use? Thank you. Madam Moderator, I stand today to advance Article 2 because it's very much the sentiment of all the residents in this town. It is very appropriate. However, what we want to do, I want to make an amendment to that particular article. And what we want to do is, let me read the amendment. We encourage the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, to act expeditiously to find an appropriate and meaningful way to specifically recognize law enforcement in the town of Danvers.
Is there a second? Mr. Zubrick?
Thank you. Madam Moderator and town meeting members, we are the legislative body of this town. We have a responsibility to all our residents. And what we wanted to do is to reinforce Article 2, because Article 2 is very specific, and I personally like it because it's reflective of exactly the feelings that all of the residents in this town have. The one thing that I was looking for, and I think by making this amendment, is to encourage the Board of Selectmen to develop a specific process of how to manage this issue. So all I ask is that we vote this this amendment, and all it does is increases the value of that article, because I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for writing it, because it was exactly what we were feeling. So now, I would like to, there's other
Mr. Zubrick, if I could just ask just a moment of clarity on the proposed amendment. You would like this language, the way I'm reading it and listening to you, you would like this language appended as perhaps number 5?
Correct.
Okay. So not in substitution of the article, but
No.
rather appended as a number 5 to the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
As I expressed earlier, I and many other people in town wholeheartedly support Article 2 as written, but it needs some teeth to it, and that's what we wanted to get across.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Jaworski? John, you can either, oh, good, okay.
My name is John Jaworski. Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is John Jaworski, Precinct 2. Just quickly, just to give you a little personal reference, my father was a firefighter. I had two uncles who were firefighters in the city of Salem. Myself and my wife have been longtime teachers, so we understand service to our community. The thing I want to say about the amendment is that with the article as it stands, it says, express appreciation for Danvers first responders and their families. To my knowledge, that has always included those who serve in the law enforcement community. I have never separated them. I see those who respond to our needs as being an entire group of people that are throughout our community, whether it be the hospitals, whether it be the EMTs, whether it be our firefighters, whether it be our police departments. So I think that my point is that this article as it stands actually does support the police department and the law enforcement. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the original group that started the petition, or the point that's coming up later, said that they are citizens to restore respect for the first responders. To restore? I've seen signs in Precinct 2 along my street that do support those first responders. I haven't seen any indication, and maybe you have in your precincts, of people in Danvers not supporting people who are first responders. So I think that my stand on the amendment is that I think that as it is written, Article 2 does in fact support all first responders, including those men and women who serve in our police force here in Danvers.
Thank you, Mr. Jaworski. Is there further discussion? Mr. Powers?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mike Powers, Precinct 6. I also rise in opposition to the amendment. This article is put together, has been work of the board and the town manager to be inclusive for all groups in this community. And there's mechanisms and requirements for this committee to do just that. Most of what Mr. Jaworski said, I agree with. Actually, everything he said, I agree with wholeheartedly. I come from a family where my father was also a Danvers police officer. I have a son-in-law who's a police officer in another community, and I have a brother that's a federal prosecutor covering the entire Midwest for federal police and investigation activities. But there's more, much more in terms of people we want to recognize across this land and in this community. First, healthcare workers. In the midst of this COVID, over 1,200 healthcare workers have died. These are people who didn't choose to join a police department, who didn't prepare to protect themselves, who had no expectation that their life would be in danger. But here we are. And those people continue to respond and to do tremendous work. And I think we have to hold those people in high esteem as well. My last point is, I have another son who's active military. He's an infantry officer, 3 deployments, and I asked him about it. I can't tell you his exact words in response. I'd be ruled out of order for foul language, but The essence, and I take this man's word to heart, the essence of adulation of specific occupations isn't proper. The occupation itself can be honorable. The people who join it have intents to be honorable, but they're volunteering to do a job, to do some work. And they make sacrifices as well. The reason I'm particularly moved by my son is, on his third deployment, his first son was born. He could have come home, but he had several other enlisted people under his command who would not have that opportunity. So he did not take it. He would not leave his men. And I was honored in a hangar at Fort Campbell in Kentucky at 4 o'clock in the morning to see him meet his firstborn. And that moment was unbelievable. But that sacrifice that he made, he will tell you was part of his job. He signed up for it. He took an oath to do it. And he's doing it for all of us. So if he is not in favor of taking a specific group and holding them up above others, when there are many, many hundreds of thousands of people sacrificing today, I'm going to deliver that message. And I hope you will support me, Mr. Jaworski, and not approve this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment?
Hi, I'm Kathy Simon from Precinct 7. I hope to get some clarification on the amendment. From what I heard, and I'm hoping maybe for a reread, is what I heard him say was that he's just looking for us to expedite the actions that are outlined in 1 through 4. If number 5 just means expedite, that means don't labor on with this or make it sound like something and not do anything, then I'm in favor of it. So I wonder if we could have a rereading of the amendment before we vote.
Certainly. So I'll take the opportunity again. The amendment would act as number 5 to the recommendation of the Finance Committee, and I'll read it. We encourage the Select Board to act expeditiously to find an appropriate and meaningful way to specifically recognize law enforcement in the town of Danvers. Okay? Is there further discussion? I saw another hand up. Yes. You know, let's all remember as we're all using the same microphone, let's make sure we take a wipe when we're done and wipe it off for the next person, please.
Moderator Kevin Wood, Precinct 7. Very proud member of the Danvers Police Department. I would like to yield my time to Eileen Harris.
Okay? And we have our acting police chief as our runner this evening. While we wait, is there any discussion? Further discussion?
Acceptable to take the mask off while at the mic, ma'am? Thank you.
Just make sure you wipe after.
Yeah, yes, moderator. Good evening, fellow town meeting members. Rick Betancourt, town meeting member, Precinct 5 now. Apologies. Why are we really here? We're really here. A significant number of people were upset at a decision that was made and signed a petition, called for a special town meeting. And what we're doing right now is acting on how our bylaws and our town meeting form of government works, and we're going to have the real ruling body, the individuals, us town meeting members, talk about a decision that was made and hopefully find an amicable solution to it. A little bit about me. I didn't have a choice to be born into a law enforcement family. I respect Mr. Lander's comments, and I sincerely appreciate your son's service to our country. And you're right, he chose. He chose to serve honorably, and I respect him for that. If anybody in here knows who I am, I work with military every single day. But I did not have a choice to become a son of a law enforcement officer. My father served 35 years in the city of Peabody. He did every job that you could possibly imagine. Patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, first school safety officer in the city of Peabody. Had lots of saves, impacted thousands of lives while he was an officer. Even involved in the city's only fatal shooting up until the late 90s. So I had all this to deal with. So what I think people seem to we're losing sight of right now is, yes, this is about supporting our law enforcement community, but I think our families are kind of lost in the shuffle, lost in our discussion. And what we had tried to do at the October 20th Board of Selectmen meeting was propose an idea of a different symbol that would be expeditiously...
Mr. Betancourt,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
need to interrupt you.
Yes.
Because that is not relevant to the discussion that we're having right now, which is Mr. Zubrick's amendment.
Correct. My apologies.
That's
Yep.
okay.
So what we're trying to do here with the amendment is to move things up a little bit. I hear conversations all the time about sons and daughters having a difficult time with what's going on in America against our law enforcement. And it's true. They volunteered to wear that thin blue line, or walk the thin blue line, wear the badge. They chose to do that. But my daughter sent out a Snapchat to all her friends and said, "What's it like being the son or daughter of a police officer?" And the responses were overwhelming. My father was told to take different routes home in fear of reprisal because he's a police officer. Other friends of hers, parents were advised to take down any sort of symbolization of law enforcement from their house, flags on their cars, symbols on their cars, stickers on their cars, simply because of law enforcement. So they chose, and the reason why we're expeditiously asking things to be done now sooner than later is because law enforcement and the manner in which policing is done has changed in the last 6 months. 18 months ago, police officers weren't getting firebombed in their motor vehicle. They weren't being summarily executed in their cars either, with people walking up and just pulling the trigger behind their ears. This wasn't happening 2 years ago. So it's changed. It's manifested itself into something that the decision that was made, which spontaneously caused all of this, was done so in honor of a fallen law enforcement officer. And that's why it started. And I'm sorry that, I don't know why some people have bifurcated in such a way that it's not supposed to be, wasn't supposed to be that way. And it didn't have to be that way, but a few decided to make it that way. So I'm in support of the amendment, and I hope that people can read between the lines as to what I'm saying in respect to Madam Moderator's guidelines that we discussed earlier. And I thank you, Madam Moderator, for clarifying that before we got up here. But it's the right thing to do. And I'll just leave you with this. Every single year, there are over 50 million, and this is under the Bureau of Justice Statistics, you guys can look it up. Every year, there are 50 million interactions of law enforcement with public over the age of 16. 50 million. And yet, the number of felonious acts committed by law enforcement is minimal to nearly non-existent relative to that large number. And in Danvers, I asked Chief Ambrose to verify for me. Over a 5-year period, not a single racially motivated complaint against the law enforcement community of Danvers, who also patrols Route 114, Route 1, 128, and 95. and yet not, and those lead to very racially, ethnically, culturally diverse communities. And yet our town has consistently performed way above par. What's happening in Danvers is nothing. And I think what we need to consider is we need to lobby and legislate on facts and not feelings in some cases. And I think Danvers has done an amazing job with our law enforcement community. And I think some of the ideas that we have proposed leading up to this should have been accepted. And I hope that they will be expeditiously. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. And I believe we have the citizen who would like, why don't you thank you, Mr. Betancourt, for remembering to do that. If you would please introduce yourself to the body when you reach the microphone. Would you please introduce yourself to the body when you reach the microphone? And again, we're speaking to Mr. Zubrick's amendment.
Okay. My name is Eileen Harris, and I've lived in Danvers for 39 years. I'm not a police officer. I do not have family ties, as many do. What I can tell you is my story. My daughter died in 2004. She died of a drug overdose. I was out of town with her 4.5-year-old son. I received the call early in the morning with that horrific news. It was devastating. Life became surreal in one moment. We spent the next 4 days in grief and utter disbelief. The night of her funeral, I was sitting with my husband and a few friends when I realized I didn't know the details of that evening. I called the Danvers police station and stated who I was in my situation. Within a half hour, I had a Danvers officer that was head of that deadly call standing in my home. He gave us the distressing details of that dreadful night. Most importantly, he was there with us in heartache. He told us how sorry and sad he was. He told me how, respectfully and with dignity, how they handled my daughter. Grief was written all over his face. In his speech, he admitted how deeply this had affected him. I cannot imagine what our officers in blue go through on a daily basis, how challenging and overwhelming. Most will not see this side of his job. I'm willing to stand behind the decision of swapping the flags out and having them fly in multiple spots in Danvers for a month, preferably the month of May.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes.
Madam, I need to interrupt you. That is not relevant to the discussion at
Okay.
hand.
Okay,
We are discussing Article 2.
okay. Then I would like to end this with, blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called sons of God. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Mr. Zubrick's amendment? John, I've already called on you. There is a motion to move the question. There is a motion to move the question. Is there a second? All those in favor of moving the question so that we take up the amendment to Article 2, kindly say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The question has been moved. We now turn to voting on Mr. Zubrick's amendment, and we will review that right now. Mr. Zubrick has proposed an amendment to the Finance Committee recommendation to add a subsection 5, which reads, "We encourage the Select Board to act expeditiously to find an appropriate and meaningful way to specifically recognize law enforcement in the town of Danvers." All those in favor of adding that language to the recommendation of the Finance Committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The amendment does not carry. We now turn to Article 2, the recommendation of the Finance Committee. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We now turn to Article 3, Wetland Protection Bylaw Revisions, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 26, Wetland Protection Bylaw of the general bylaws to clarify the presumptions associated with projects in the riverfront area, update definitions, performance standards, and application procedures, conditions, and enforcement details, or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend that the town vote to amend Chapter 26, Wetland Protection Bylaw of the general bylaws to clarify the presumptions associated with projects in a riverfront area, update definitions, performance standards, and application procedures, conditions, and enforcement details.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Article 4, Town Bylaw Amendment, Stormwater Management and Land Disturbance, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 39 of the general bylaws as follows, or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend that the town vote to amend Chapter 39 of the general bylaws as it appeared in the warrant and explanation report as Appendix B.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Article 5, Mass DOT request to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw and zoning map to zone approximately 1.85 acres bounded by Route 1, Center Street, Armory Road, and Dayton Street into the highway corridor zone, or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend no action and request that this article be referred back to the planning board for further discussion.
Is there any discussion? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Mitch Abatessa. I live at 4 Putnam Lane, and I had just a couple of questions about this, and just let me know if I, step out of line or anything. What happens if this doesn't get voted to be in the highway corridor zone? I live within walking distance of this, and to me, it's a buffer from some of the noise and pollution of Route 1 and Route 95, and I wanted to know what the town is planning if they vote this into the highway corridor zone. That's my question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
So right now, the recommendation of the Finance Committee is that they do nothing. Okay? That's the recommendation to the body to say the town does nothing right now and refer it back to the planning board. Okay, just for clarification. Mr. Bennett, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So the Finance Committee says no action, back to the Planning Board, and the question is mute unless the Planning Board decides for some reason to bring it back to town meeting. So at the moment, nothing will happen if we vote for it.
The only one other thing I had about that, I'm sorry, was that it did state that it potentially could be, so if the zoning the parcel to HCZ, therefore it would be consistent with the area and likely result in the parcel contributing to the town's tax base in the future. And I understand nothing is planned right now. However, that sounds as though they're thinking about possibly putting something there. In my head, that's what I'm thinking.
We don't know what the state's planning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there any further discussion? This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the Finance Committee recommendation, which is to refer the matter back to the Planning Board for further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Article 6, Citizen Petition, to see if the town will vote to authorize the use and display of the thin blue line flag on fire and other public safety apparatus or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend no action.
Thank you. And I believe the petitioner is Keith Lucy. Chief Level, if you wouldn't mind grabbing him. Thank you. I apologize for the delay. It was my understanding that Keith was going to be in the room to speak to Article 2, and I guess he elected not to do that. So now we get he is the main petitioner of Article 6, so we will grab him. Great idea. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's no singing in COVID times, sorry. Quietly hum, right. Well, now is a good chance to remind everybody we're going to be back here in several weeks. We have another special town meeting scheduled for November 19th with the Finance Committee meeting. When, Mr. Chairman?
It's the first Thursday of November, the 5th.
The 5th. It's what now? Oh, it's the 16th. I'm sorry. What was the 19th? I don't even know what day it is. So the town meeting's on the 16th. The town manager just corrected me. And again, we'd ask if that you are unable to attend, if you would just reach out to Town Clerk Kathy Ellsworth and let us know so that we can protect the quorum for that night as well. And I see Mr. Lucy is in the back of the room, and he's waving to me.
Good evening, Madam Moderator and town meeting members.
So Keith, if you could just we're on mass, so if you could just introduce yourself.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
My name is Keith Lucy. I've been in town for 27 years. I was a member of the Board of Selectmen for 9. In that role, I was involved in a lot of difficult decisions. At the community conversation, I made the point that night that none of you ran for these offices because decisions are going to be easy, but you ran for these offices because sometimes decisions are hard. And this, I thought, we began this effort back in August, and to some of us, we thought it was a very simple thing, but it's really involved much, much more. So as we know, I wasn't, give me a second. I was actually prepared to speak to the amendment on Article 2, but that ended awful quick. So what I did want to raise tonight and talk to hopefully the amendment of Article 2, but now that that's dead, we'll have to go back to Article 6. Everyone knows the history of what's going on here, right? A symbol was used on the back of a fire truck. The symbol was a flag. The symbol at the time was identified by a person that filed a complaint. The complaint was summarily acted upon by the town manager, and by the timetable available with the email dump, the email came to the town manager at 10:14 a.m. 8 minutes later, he had a response back to the person who sent the complaint to him saying, "I'll take care of it." And 4 minutes later after that, so a total of 12 minutes, the decision was made that the flag should be removed. And this body, the Board of Selectmen, the committee approach that's now being proposed, certainly, I think everyone would acknowledge that's a much better approach that could have happened that day. But it didn't. And people are upset. Anyone that knows me knows my history as a member of the Board of Selectmen of supporting the Danvers first responders in general, firefighters, the dispatchers specifically, right? We went through a big, long discussion over a dispatch center. We think we did the right job. But police have always had a place in my heart, whether I'm on the right side of them or the wrong side of them. They've always been right. So when my phone started to ring, because I have personal friendships with officers that were on the force in Danvers, are retired now in Danvers, are on the force in Danvers, are in the force in other towns, I couldn't just hang up and do nothing. We were encouraged at the community conversation that if we didn't like the action the board took, which was to simply affirm the decision, that we could gather signatures and move to a special town meeting. And here we are. We were then criticized a few times, saying that, it cost too much and we should delay it to the next meeting. And the state law says 45 days, and I don't think I'm in a position to allow the town to violate a state law. But so here we are. So the discussions that have gone on since then by email between board members, emails between residents and the members of the group that we put together and Board of Selectmen members have been mostly respectful once the initial explosion was over. Once things settled down and became more rational, and that's actually what I called for that night at the community conversation, was honest, respectful discussion. And largely that has happened. There's been some ridiculous stuff go on, but largely it's respectful and meaningful. And in particular, when one of the first emails that came back to the town manager was, when those flags went up, they were viewed as not political whatsoever, and the guys are simply supporting our brothers on the police department as they navigate through a very difficult era in our history. And it was mentioned earlier tonight, why are the police different? Why are the police special? The joint statement started to go down that road when it said, this debate has taken a toll on the morale and optimism of our public safety professionals in general. This makes us sad, and we need to address it. We need to listen to our first responders, understand their frustration, and find ways to reaffirm our support for them in ways that do not feel unwelcoming to our neighbors. So we believe that well, this is moot because it's Article 2, but hang on. We feel that the current situation that law enforcement is experiencing makes this more urgent than all first responders or all public safety personnel. I do have one more. Give me a second, please. I lost the page. The page I was looking for went through specific incidents in the past 3 months that have happened since this flag came down. Not that they're related, but since this came down, there's been 3 specific incidents. None of them in Danvers, thank God. In LA County, 2 officers were simply in their cruiser on a routine patrol, and a gunman came up and shot into the cruiser, injuring both. The police union headquarters in Seattle was firebombed. The Seattle Police Department had its doors attempted to be cemented shut with quick-drying cement while fires were lit nearby. Doesn't take much to figure out what the attempt was. We're going to lock them in and let them burn. That is unacceptable behavior. And that, I know the firefighters put their life in danger every time they go to a fire. They're not being shot at on their fire trucks. No one is firebombing the dispatch center. No one is running in, no one is cementing shut hospital doors and trying to burn doctors and nurses. But that is literally what's going on today in our country. So to think there's not some urgency around the life of a police officer is to ignore all of that. Now, over the discussion of the specific article language in Article 6, we've moved our position several times. We've been in front of the Board of Selectmen with what we thought was a great solution to expeditiously act and specifically recognize police officers, where we knew that there was this committee being proposed. We are not objecting to that committee whatsoever. But you heard earlier tonight, they're hoping to have some action by the spring. To me, the issue is much more urgent than that. And I want to read something that came from my older brother, actually. In many of the public forums, we've heard dreadful stories about how members of the LGBT community would be scared to go out alone, afraid that they would be assaulted because of who they were. They found comfort when they would see the pride flag flying, knowing that the community was with them in their identity. A flag has a lot of meaning. When they look at that flag, they can say, I'm okay here, I'm safe here. This community has my back. That's a great thing. Now let's switch roles and switch flags. Police officers across the country wake up in the morning and are afraid to go to work. Wouldn't it be nice to have them also see their flag flying, regardless of which one we choose, regardless of where it's being flown? That demonstrates that this community respects them in the dangerous work that they do. Many other first responders are also deserving respect, but the situation with police officers is urgent. I can't say that enough. It's urgent, right? And I have already mentioned, I don't see them, others being attacked at their places of work, being told, if you don't like the job, just quit. What we're trying to do tonight, and I hope that we'll have another amendment similar to the one against Article 2, that simply encourages the Board of Selectmen to act expeditiously to specifically recognize law enforcement officials in this town and let them know urgently that this town has their back. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. The meeting will be in order. Not a political rally here. No applause. This is a business meeting. And I ask you to conduct yourself accordingly. Thank you. Before we entertain further discussion on the recommendation of the Finance Committee,
Madam Moderator, am I allowed to stay here?
Yes, there's a seat for you in the back of the room, Mr. Lucy. Thank you. Before entertaining further discussion on this citizen petition and the recommendation of the Finance Committee, The chair will indicate that she is in receipt of a legal opinion by town council as to the efficacy of this proposed article, and would just offer the information to the town meeting body that there's a question whether this would be within the scope, beyond the scope of the Town Managers Act on one extreme. The other extreme would be any action that the town meeting body would take on this matter would, in support of the citizen petition, would at best be advisory, at worst be, I don't want to say illegal, invasive of the Town Manager Act. Thank you, Attorney DeLuca. So with that being said, is there further discussion?
Good evening, Madam Moderator, town meeting members. My name is Deborah Gesualdo, Precinct 1. This evening, I rise before you to compel you to stand on the right side of this decision for the following reasons. When we say that Black lives matter, or that lives of Indigenous people or other people of color matter, it does not mean that anybody else's life matters less. We must acknowledge that we rise by lifting others and by acknowledging the history of systemic oppression and racism in the United States. The decision made by Town Manager Bartha to have the thin blue line flag removed from municipal equipment was well within his rights as town manager under the Town Manager Act. Political speech during work hours in the majority of instances is not permissible for municipal employees. To many people, the thin blue line flags stand for the following: a wall of silence that intimidates officers and prevents them from acting as whistleblowers. Hate and racism due to the flags being flown frequently next to the Confederate flag, which is a known neo-Nazi and white supremacist symbol in the US and Europe. These flags are flown at hate-fueled events like the Unite the Right rally in Virginia back in 2017 that was attended by Klansmen, Proud Boys, and other white supremacist group members. Ultimately, one of those people drove their car into a crowd of counter-protesters. The result, death and injuries. The thin blue line flag has been flown at countless racist, hate-charged events before and since that event. This symbol that the town manager had removed from municipal equipment is a political symbol that has become associated with hate, white supremacy, neo-Nazis, and neo-fascism. Our town is better than what this flag has come to symbolize. Our town is not perfect, and we as a community have work to do. Danvers has miles to go before it becomes a place where all people of color will feel completely welcomed and are not marginalized and disenfranchised. That being said, upholding the town manager's decision would be one step toward a more inclusive, equitable, and just Danvers for all. If we as a body choose to make the wrong decision and allow this political symbol that is now a symbol of brutality, hate, and neo-fascism to be displayed on municipal equipment, then all town employees, including teachers, town hall employees, etc., need to be allowed to engage in unfettered political speech during work hours and using municipal equipment. Black lives matter. Indigenous people matter. People of color matter. We rise by lifting others, and it is time to lift up the people of color who are our neighbors in Danvers. I'm asking you to join me by standing on the right side of this decision. Symbols of white supremacy have no home in our community here in Danvers. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Jaworski.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Again, Mr. Jaworski, John Jaworski from Precinct 2. I think we have to be clear about this. In all respect to what Mr. Betancourt and Mr. Lucy said, I understand that, and I think all of us have that perspective of what's happening throughout our country. But that isn't the issue that's before us tonight. The issue before us tonight is Danvers. And as I alluded to earlier, I think there is a great deal of respect, including myself, for our law enforcement officers here in Danvers. The second thing about the display of the flag is that it's been quoted that we're in a war. So who are the soldiers? Using that analogy, does that mean that the person who's been educated to fly a jet in war is more important than the person who can manage a tank? Is the person that manages the tank more important than the person who's the infantry person who has to fight in the front lines? In my mind, they are all equal. They are all to be respected, to be honored, because they're in the fight for us. So I think it's important we keep those two perspectives as we decide on this particular citizen's petition. I have another issue, too, and I'm not a legal person in terms of the flag code, and I know there's been some discussion about this, comparing this discussion to the flag in Libya or Togo. But is there anyone in this auditorium that when they look at that flag does not see Old Glory? So from that perspective, I'm not sure if this is something that we need to support. And lastly, if those of us really do want to show extra support as an individual, as an American, that we do want to show our support for law enforcement, then you can do what a person down the street from me does. He has a Blue Lives Matter sign, and he puts it on his front lawn. Great. We all have that privilege and that honor as being Americans. So I submit that we go with the recommendation of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Trask.
Good evening, members. Just want to give a couple comments. Sure. In life, perception is everything. And although tonight we're talking about one thing that has to do with the town of Danvers, as we all know, it has to do with a number of other factors. I've been a member of this board since 1968. Bill Clark, I think, has served longer than me, but he's much older than me. But looking...
Hey, no personal invective here.
Over the years, we've had a number of controversies. Dog leash law. I got a few calls on that. When we had to sell the Hunt Memorial Hospital, got 3 or 4 calls on that. When they wanted to build the new high school at the Gates Field, got a few calls on that. With this particular item, I've never had so many phone calls, letters, and emails. And most of them have been basically against this. But it's not a black and white matter. And those who speak against it have to, first of all, say how much they appreciate the police department and the fire department, our first responders, and of course we do. And in Danvers, we're a community of family members who know and are familiar with most of the personnel who serve in those departments. I've always been proud that my father was a call fireman, and although he was a heavy-duty banker in Boston, his real love was to be a call fireman. And I spent many a Saturday with him down at Central Fire Station watching the guys drink from those neat mugs, cups of coffee and things like that. And my father was also the grandfather of Selectman Trask. Bob Osgood was one of my best friends, and a number of years ago, Leland Marty, fire chief, wrote a history of the fire department, and Dick Solo and I helped him out on that and added a little bit to it, and I was very proud of that. I don't have as much communication with the police department, My brother used to. He intimately knew many of the police officers in town, but I've always respected them. But this is a little bit different. And to me, I've always thought I can write pretty good. But one of the first emails I got, I'd like to just read a section of it, because I think this person, and I don't want to give his name because I didn't ask if it was all right to, I think put it in succinct terms. And by the way, I always thought that the first responders were, the heroes of our life, and I still believe that. But since COVID, we've got a lot of other people we have to remember. And although we can have a special place for the police and fire department, it is important to remember those others. I had the opportunity to give a little talk when we had our virtual Memorial Day program. And besides talking about the police and fire, I came up with about 35 other occupations that I never would have thought were heroic, but as we now know are. From the grocery clerk, the mailman, all these people who have to be on the front line when I can be at home safe in my homestead. But this, I thought, kind of put together what my thoughts were and why I think this is not the right course for the town. And by the way, a number of people on the other side are good friends of mine, and I respect what they're trying to do, but I think perception so much matters, and a lot of people were perceiving this not as the heroism of police and fire department, but as something else. And here's the quote: "We live in irrational times. One can fully support our police and fire departments and support social movements that seek fair treatment for all citizens. These are not diametrically opposed viewpoints. But that's not the country we live in right now. We live in a politically polarized environment where compromise and empathy are seen as weakness, and where when one group of people say that their lives matter, and it is met with a resounding no. While the thin blue line flag that our fire department flew was meant only to support their colleagues in the police department, we need to recognize that it is not seen as a supportive symbol to all Danversites. This may be unfortunate, but we need to recognize that this is our reality. We support and depend upon our police and fire department, which are vital public services. We also support Town Manager Bartha's directive, validated by a vote of our select people, to prohibit this political symbol from town-owned property. The removal of these flags is absolutely not a horrific act of disrespect. In fact, we believe that this is an ultimate show of respect for who we want to be in the town of Danvers: inclusive, thoughtful, and respectful. So I respectfully ask that we don't approve this, that we go on to continue to be a town in which we support each other and the thoughts and feelings of those of our other citizen friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Rick Betancourt, Precinct 5 now. I just really wanted to say, I know which way we're going to go here, and I just wanted to make a couple comments. I did have a constituent of mine in Precinct 5 reach out And I said, would you, he couldn't make it tonight and wouldn't be able to speak really. He said he had kids. I said, would you mind giving me a quote? And he says, absolutely. And I think this is important to when you hear what I'm about to say, it's this capitulation of us as a society to quickly fold on what symbol association is and just go with what a driven narrative really is, because there's a lot more out there that don't see it that way. This gentleman lives Precinct 5, Mr. Michael Degis, and I'm just going to quote what he wrote me. I grew up in Danvers and know firsthand what it's like to be an African American in Danvers, Mass. I'm a disabled veteran, a Marine, and supporter of law enforcement, and there is no way that either iteration of the flag in question is a symbol of hate, racism, or diversity. I have seen my own Marine Corps flag in every other branch of the military flown at various gatherings that many of us would deem inappropriate. And yet, are we as a collective to automatically now say that those flags are racial, ideological symbols? The American flag itself is flown at those events, and yet we're okay with it. It's not, nor has it ever been, nor will it ever be, a symbol of racism, hate, or divisiveness. And I can tell you, as somebody who has grown up in that community, I have seen that flag draped over more coffins and at more memorials for those, as was articulated tonight in Article 2, who've given the ultimate sacrifice. So I simply ask yourself to dig down deep inside, and you have to believe in your heart it's not really racial. It's not really a neo-fascist. It is not a symbol of divisiveness. It's something that has been hijacked, and I plan on hijacking it back as hard as I can, politically, motivationally speaking, through people that I can talk to hijack that back from my law enforcement community and my law enforcement family. But the town, I am honored that the town, and the town meeting members that came out tonight, I appreciate you all showing up. We followed a process, and I will respect the decision of the town, and that's how our representative town meeting works. But I just wanted to get one of my constituents, an African-American disabled veteran in my precinct, who wanted me to say that it is not, hasn't, nor will it ever be a racial symbol. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Powers?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mike Powers, Precinct 6, and I'll be brief. Two things that struck me as far as the origins of this controversy. The first being that a fire engine is an emergency vehicle. It's not designed to carry flags that way. So I was extremely happy that the town manager ordered it off, because if my house is on fire and I need the services of the fire department, a flag fluttering in the back where the hoses come off the back of the truck doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. That said, there are a number of ways out of this, and I appreciate the town manager and the select board creating a committee to do so. And Chairman Bennett, a long time ago now this evening, mentioned an important fact that I just wanted to reemphasize, that this committee is going to consist of 3 police officers and 2 firefighters, I believe. So who better to speak for their feelings collectively than 5 representatives coming from those 2 bodies. I think this will be a very, very effective committee. I think we will work, hopefully, expeditiously, just as the petition is requested, but with the freedom to put and model the rules of that committee together as they see fit, and not encumbered or restricted by any amendment that fortunately did not go through. And I just hope that we're able to begin to move beyond this process by supporting the Finance Committee's recommendation of no action, and hopefully, after November 2nd, perhaps some of this angst and partisanship will dissipate as the committee meets, and we can talk respectively with each other and come up with a solution that's best for all. Thank you.
Thank you. There has been a motion to move the question. Is there a second? All those in favor of moving the question, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We now turn to voting on Article 6. We are voting the recommendation of the Finance Committee of no action on the citizen petition. All those in favor of the Finance Committee recommendation of no action, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion carries. Article 7, keeping of animals, to see if the town will amend zoning bylaw to revise how it regulates the keeping of animals, including potential insertion and deletion of terms, uses, and dimensional requirements, up to and including complete prohibition of the activity or take any other action thereon. Mr. Chairman.
We recommend that the town amend the zoning bylaw to revise how it regulates the keeping of animals, including the potential insertion and deletion of terms, uses, and dimensional requirements, up to and including the complete prohibition of the activity, as written on pages 2 and 3 in your warrant booklets.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Matt Duggan, Precinct 1. I rise to amend this article and specifically to maintain the status quo for the R1 zone. If you would please look at the bottom of Article 7, where you see the proposed zoning bylaw changes. I have two additions to Section 40, definitions. These pertain to livestock and poultry. So if you just bear with me, I'll read these. So to insert livestock and poultry, all domesticated mammals and birds that are customarily raised and kept for agricultural purposes, including but not limited to horses, ponies, donkeys, mules, cattle, goats, llamas, alpacas, swine, sheep, rabbits, hares, and fowl, which shall be defined as the following, but not limited to: chickens, including hens and roosters, turkeys, pigeons, capons, ducks, geese, swans, pheasants, peacocks, guinea fowl, emus, and all wild animals and game birds raised and kept in accordance with state and local law.
So is there a second on the proposed amendment? There is a second.
Okay. So I have a second definition also for Section 40. The keeping of livestock and poultry that I just had listed, keeping of livestock and poultry on residential properties. And this is defined as the raising and keeping of livestock and poultry as an accessory use to a single-family dwelling. The next part of the amendment is to amend Table 1, which is the table for allowable uses. So this is on 5 in your. Yeah, I'm having a problem with the mic, I think. So I wanted to amend, as you see in your booklet, it's number 2, amend Table 1 to the table of use follows. And it mentions the keeping of animals on residential properties. I'm amending this to be an X for R1. R2 and R3 would be permitted.
So Matt, why don't you move to the center microphone, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure.
I don't know if it's where you are standing or if it's the microphone, but you are cutting in and out. Thank you. I apologize.
Okay, thank you for bearing with me here. So for on page 5, where it talks about this table entry here for keeping of animals on residential properties, I just mentioned, to not allow that in R1, so that would be an X. Prohibit it in R1 as it is today, and allow it permit it in R2 and R3. And then I want to add another line to table 1, table of accessory uses, for the definition that I just had read shortly before, the keeping of livestock and poultry in residential properties. That would be prohibited in R1. That would be an X. And for R2 and R3, it would be permitted. So R1 properties, you may be familiar, it's pretty much all of Precinct 1, most of Precinct 2, small sections of Precinct 3 and 4. They're very small lots, typically 5, 6, maybe 7,000 square feet, and there's some even as small as 4,000. Some of the impact on the quality of life in R1 for having livestock in close proximity to your property. There may be an issue with air quality, odors, especially in the warmer months, pollution with rainwater runoff caused by animal waste that could be run onto adjacent properties, infestation of animal waste drawing flies, insects, parasites, and diseases, and also with animal food drawing rats, snakes, and other vermin. And examples that I'm thinking of is with these small lots, your peace and quiet could be impacted. If you were going to have a dinner outside in your yard, you could have animals close by, the smells and the other impacts that I had mentioned. And also it could be impacting the value of your property. If you decide to sell, buyers may not be conducive to purchasing the home if they see that there are animals next door. And then just one last thing is with the Board of Health. It's not clear to me how the Board of Health would manage this new bylaw. Through you, Madam Moderator, is there a representative of the Board of Health here tonight?
Not that I'm aware of.
So we read in this booklet in Appendix F, it talks about some of the responsibilities that the Board of Health would have. And it's not clear to me that they're really the right group to be managing this activity. So again, I think it's permissible in R2 and R3. This seems the lots are a lot larger and more conducive to this type of activity. But in R1, it's just the lots are just too small. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Duggan. I just want to clarify, because the microphone was cutting in and out, the proposed amendment is, if you look at your book, page 3 of the warrant, Mr. Duggan is suggesting that we define, we amend Section 40, which is the definitional section, and insert a definition of livestock and poultry, which is all domesticated mammals and birds that are customarily raised and kept for agricultural purposes, including but not limited to horses, ponies, donkeys, mules, cattle, goats, llama, alpaca, swine, sheep, rabbits, hares, and fowl, which shall be defined as including but not limited to chickens, hens, and roosters, turkeys, pigeons, capons, ducks, geese, swan, pheasant, peacocks, guinea fowl, emus, and all wild mammal and game birds raised and kept in accordance with state and local law. And then I think what Mr. Duggan emphasized was as far as his proposed amendments, that Table 1 be amended so that the keeping of animals on residential properties would not be allowed on R1. And that would, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that would revert it to the original bylaw. Okay? All right, we're going to have discussion on the proposed amendment. Okay.
John Almeida, Precinct 3. I just want to clarify that last point that you made. My understanding was that under the existing laws, it's by right in residential 1 and 3. Is that not correct? So it's by right in residential 3 now?
No. I'm going to ask the town manager to respond. Oh, no, Dan?
Madam Moderator, it's allowed in 2 only.
Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Nova Samade, Precinct 1. I oppose this amendment to this article because I don't think that I don't know the size of every plot in residential 1. So I think that if there are plots in residential 1 that are large enough, that the Board of Health deems large enough to have animals, then it's not up to us to decide that someone that lives in a certain residential area can or cannot have those animals. That we have a Board of Health for that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, you can use that mic. Thank you.
Good evening, Alan McCarrison, Precinct 7. I'm against the amendment only because in simple structure of what the town has done and done due diligently is that even residential 1 and R3, it would go through the zoning board as well as the Board of Health. So if your property isn't large enough, then it wouldn't be deemed permissible. But if your property is large enough, it could be. I believe that's correct. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Kathy Simon, Precinct 7. I rise to oppose the amendment as well because I did attend the Board of Health meetings when this regulations were discussed and all of the data was brought forth to them. I know that the Health Department worked diligently on it, and I feel satisfied that the Board of Health has adopted strict regulations, and the fact that these regulations will require an annual permit review and renewal to be met puts in a safeguard that makes me feel comfortable, and that our homeowners are going to have to jump through quite a few hoops to have animals on their property, and I'd like to support them.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Tim Donahue, Precinct 4. I'm going to speak to the article in a little bit, but for this amendment, I was lucky enough to buy a house in R2, and I have chickens, and I have for several years. As a stay-at-home dad, it was a great opportunity to, teach my girls the circle of life and predators and prey, where our food comes from, how to, take care of animals. And it's really something I don't want to see excluded from anybody. Now, they can make chickens work in Boston. I don't think we should have any problem having it done in R1, especially where inside of this Board of Health information, there is manure management necessary. There is all kinds of things, setbacks, all that need to be met before people can be allowed to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Rick Betancourt, Precinct 7. Precinct 5, sorry. Sorry about that. I'm rising in opposition of this particular amendment and to town meeting member Simon's point, which I thought was a great point to bring up about the annual renewal of the permitting process. I had just recently put in a shed in my backyard. It's a 10 by 12. It sounds big on paper, 120 square feet. But anything larger than that per this particular amendment is going to have to require to follow a different set of setbacks, both side and rear. And on a 5,000 square foot lot, it's going to be difficult to maintain properly the animal or husbandry in that particular yard. So it's not a big area, a 10 by 12. It's very small. You could put some chickens in there, but you're not going to, put goats, or you're not going to whatever other kind of animal husbandry. So I think the Board of Health has done a phenomenal job in town. I've been very happy with how they've enforced through COVID. I know that they've been keeping our restaurants very in line. They've done a great job there. And at the end of the day, to what town meeting member Tim Donahue had just said, I think it's a good thing to have if it fits and it permits yearly and it meets the setback requirements. And that's why we have Board of Health, to enforce policy and laws. And I think they've done a great job. So I oppose the amendment as written, and thank you very much.
There has been a motion to move the question. There's a second. All those in favor of moving the question as to the proposed amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. So we now turn to voting on the amendment as proposed. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion does not carry. We now turn to discussion on the recommendation of the Finance Committee as written. Is there any further discussion? This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the recommendation of the Finance Committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. The vote has been called, sir. The motion carries. The recommendation of the Finance Committee has passed. There's a motion to dissolve the town meeting. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We will see you back here on the 16th of November.